Welcome to Her Life Unscripted podcast, inspiring burnt out, stressed out, and stretched thin women to embrace the unscriptedness of life. Hosted by Anna Osborne.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Her Life Unscripted, episode 21. It is a beautiful day today, and I'm just really overjoyed to be able to share this interview that I did with Shirani Pathak. It is just a really, really great interview because she just is brilliant in the work that she does, and she does really deep, intense work with women, learning about kind of these hidden parts of ourselves that are actually taking up big space in our present life. And she will obviously do a great job of explaining it, and our conversation is just rich and warm and so amazing. But I had the opportunity to meet Shirani years ago. Actually, we've worked on some projects together virtually. And so to be able to sit down with her in this one-on-one capacity was really amazing because I just got to learn so much about this work that she does, but it was really just this intimate way for us to get to know each other. And I'm excited that it was an interview that you guys get to listen to. One thing I do want to share about the interview with Shirani is that she talks about some really deep work that she does in the psychotherapy room around kind of healing that inner child or that wounded part of ourselves. And she does mention this in the interview, but I want to highlight it on the onset, is that is deep work, and it is work that should be done with a licensed professional. And so my hope is that some of you will hear this interview and just realize how meaningful this work is and be able to reach out and connect with somebody to help you with that work. But I want to just give that disclaimer at the very beginning, so that as you're hearing our time together in our interview, you're really having it with the mindset of how powerful and how much there needs to be a guide with you when you're doing this work. And so to share a little bit about Shirani, she is the founder and director of the Relationship Center of Silicon Valley. And what's so cool is her practice is a holistic psychotherapy practice located in San Jose. And what she does, the work that they do there, is working with women who struggle in relationships to really develop a deep and meaningful relationship with themselves, because that is the foundation for any successful relationship. And I just think it's so powerful the ways that she's able to really talk about, whether we are in a relationship or single or struggling in a relationship, that these concepts are relevant to all of us, because we can't be fully present and succeeding in relationships with others if we're not succeeding in those relationships with ourselves. So I'm just excited to be able to share this with you guys, and I cannot wait to hear your input. At the end of the interview, I'll share a little bit about what I got from the interview. So I want you just to listen and have your minds open and your hearts open and just receive this amazing information that Shirani is just so gifted to be able to share with us. Enjoy, everyone. Well, welcome, Shirani, to Her Life Unscripted podcast. I am just delighted to have you here on the show today and being able to just meet my audience and be able to share about your wonderful expertise and just spend a little bit of time on this hot afternoon just connecting. So thank you so much for being on the show.
You're welcome, Anna, and thank you so much for inviting me to participate. I just love the idea, the concept behind the show, and I'm really excited to be here with you and your audience today.
Thanks. Yeah, it's really exciting now that it's launched and it's out there for everybody to hear, is really being able to kind of figure out what the identity of the show is. It's this really kind of cool thing that I'm just sitting back and observing and seeing what it's going to evolve into. So it's pretty exciting time right now.
Yeah, that identity formation stage is really cool, and it'll shift and it'll grow and it'll evolve as you shift and grow and evolve, and it's just really exciting.
Yeah, I just actually last week in my office, I rearranged some furniture. There was just kind of the energy was off, and so I rearranged it, and all my clients came in and they went, to the left instead of the right, because that's where the couch used to be, and they all were like, "You're a therapist. You're supposed to have things the same for us. Like, why did you move all of your furniture?" And I'm like, "Hey, us therapists are used to change all the time. Sorry about that." But it was really funny, the reaction. They were just like, "You're not allowed to do this. You did not have our permission."
You did not warn us. You're switching things up.
I know. It's so true. But I love that idea of kind of, the identity and just allowing it to be what it is. And we actually are going to talk today about this very interesting term called inner child. And Shirani and I were talking before I started recording of, despite, having my master's in psychology, my knowledge of the inner child kind of stopped at grad school, just in terms of kind of the therapy that I practice and things like that. So I'm really excited today about this topic, to be able to just explore what is our inner child, why is it so important, and all those sorts of things, and also be able to learn from you as well. So I'm excited.
Yeah, and I love doing inner child work. Like, it is phenomenal, and I've seen such tremendous change in people once they start relating with their inner child. And so I'm really excited to share with your listeners today a little bit more about inner child work.
Fantastic. So let's just start from the basic, right? Because I think inner child is a very psychologically heavy term, if you will. It's one that kind of gets thrown around, but people may not necessarily have a depth of knowledge of what it is. So can you explain just when you say inner child, what does that refer to, or what does that mean?
The way I look at the inner child, and I have to start off by saying, even though I am a therapist by training, I'm like a healer is totally what I am. And so I'm not going to be sharing about the different psychological perspectives or different theorists or, internal family systems or this theorist describe, that's not what I will be talking about and focusing on. What I'll be sharing about are my experiences in my healer role and how I work with this inner child from a healer's perspective. So I have no idea who all the theorists are that put this together, but it's just purely based on my personal and professional experience when I talk about this. And so what I have found is that the inner child is really it's a wounded part of ourself that lives in our psyche, is basically what it is. And it's some people might also call it parts work. So this inner child work, parts work, it's all really similar. They kind of throw around these different names, but really it's some part of our childhood growing up that didn't make sense to us, that didn't get resolution, that now lives within us and runs the show if we don't learn how to relate with it.
I think that's a great definition, because it's talking about this wounded part of us that's an old part, right? It's a part from when we were young, and it's something happened in that period of our life that, like you said, didn't make sense or didn't get healed or didn't get resolved, and it still gets credibility in the present day. Like, it still is running the show, like you said, despite it being an old part of us that needs to be healed and not let go, but let be part of the past versus ruling what we're trying to do in our present.
Yeah, actually, and as you're summarizing my definition of it, it really leads me to thinking of self-sabotage. So what the inner child does is it's that part that is wounded and controls things. And when I just want to go back and say that there was a time that these mechanisms that part of you used were helpful. It might have been helpful at one point to play small and to feel afraid if, you witnessed X, Y, or Z, and or heard a sound that startled you. Like, at some point that might have been okay, and it was really a way that someone survived. But as we get older and as we grow and develop and into our adult selves, we don't have to have that part like keeping us safe in that way anymore. And so what ends up happening is we try to keep ourselves safe, or we think that we're going to do something, and then this part of us that starts to feel afraid starts to act up like, oh my gosh, this isn't safe, this isn't safe, this isn't safe, and then keeps us very small and therefore sabotaging whatever it is that we are trying to do.
Yeah, I think that just self-sabotage in and of itself it's a great way to bring it, like you said, kind of to the forefront, because there are so many ways that we do see people making decisions that end up taking them farther backwards without even knowing why they're doing it.
Yes, and it's not that we're trying to eliminate or eradicate that part of us. We're just trying to help that part heal so that it can learn to trust us as our adult selves. And so, my inner child, I'll share an example. Last week, I did my first webinar to a group of professionals, my colleagues, and it felt super scary. And there was a part of me that was like, you can't do this. You're going to mess this up. You have nothing to say. And when I sat with that part, I recognized that this comes from that younger place. This came from my inner child, just concerned about how others might perceive me if I were to come out and talk about all these things. And after I just sat with that part of myself, I held her, I loved her, I let her know it's going to be okay. She then gave me permission 10:30 p.m. the night before my webinar to go ahead and do the slideshow and get everything prepared for that webinar. And so that's a personal example, just a really recent one of how this operates. So it was just about really holding her, loving her, witnessing her, and getting her to remember that I'm the adult in charge and that she can trust me and it's going to be okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a very powerful way of describing it. Such a concrete example of something that I would imagine, and I can, think of my own experiences that come up more often than we might be really aware of.
Yeah, and this is why it's so important to get that relationship with her. Because she pops up in a lot of different places. You can be at the grocery store and someone, accidentally cuts you in line, and that can trigger off a whole set of experiences of I'm not important and this person just jumped in front of me, and then you're either causing a scene at the grocery store or internally fuming and then get home and snap at your loved ones, and so it's just really interesting how this inner child really plays a part in our lives.
Yeah, and I think that's a great thing to kind of expand on too. And so knowing what our inner child is, this wounded part of us that hasn't found that healing or that resolution, that's taking up space in the present, and trying to be in charge in the present. How do we become aware of our inner child? Like what are the indicators or the things that we're looking for to be aware that there's something else that is governing?
That's a really good question. And in thinking of a short way of explaining it, perhaps, maybe using that grocery store example, right, is we can recognize that our inner child, our wounded inner child, actually, might be calling the shots if all of a sudden we're acting out of character. We've been peaceful and calm, life is good, using the grocery store example, life was good before this person accidentally got in front of you in line at the store, right? And it's in that moment where she then automatically is like, what? How dare you get in front of me? And then it just is that instant shift into this anger or this bitterness or chaos when it's something out of character.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of describing it. That negative self-talk kicks in, the chaos ensues of feeling like you said everything was calm before and now this trigger has happened and I'm behaving in a way that doesn't connect with kind of who I see myself to be in the world.
Yes.
Yeah, I think those are great indicators. I think it was an amazing answer. It totally makes sense for me. And so, Brene Brown, she talks so much about this the story we tell ourselves, and that when we're in that place of crisis or triggered, it's so important to be able to be very aware of what the story is we're telling ourselves. And that really that's exactly what you're saying, is that when we're in that moment of, kind of trigger, if we'll call it that it is, how dare they think they can just walk all over me, whatever, using that grocery store example, is that story we're telling ourselves starts to become a connection to that inner child?
I do believe so. And I love Brené Brown and her work. And yes, that is the story, because the story has now become, I'm not important. It's become, they don't see me. It's become, I'm not worthy. It takes us down that whole spiral. I call it that rabbit hole that just spirals us down. And that's exactly what it is, because now I've flipped from, oh, my day is so peaceful, to this old story of, this person did that to me on purpose and I am invisible or I am not important. And so now we're stuck in that story that's so old and not true for today. When in reality, that person might have just not recognized that the line is actually behind you, they might have just been flighty but there you go. You're acting out of character.
Right. That old story just takes on and just starts ruling. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you're doing this healing work, and I love that you describe yourself as a healer. I mean, that's what I describe myself as too, because I think that, when we kind of get behind that lens of a therapist or psychotherapist, it starts creating all these barriers where healing feels like such a more embracing term for me. And so when you're talking about that healing work around inner child, it sounds like it is really being able to identify what is that story? What's that place of trigger that you go to? I love the idea of this rabbit hole that you've dove down. And then what transpires from there as people are becoming aware of, wow, there is a story, there's a theme to the story that I'm telling myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this, I just have to say, this is like really deep work. And so it's not something that, and I hate calling it this, but the Band-Aid therapist, like this inner child work is not like a Band-Aid therapy. It's not, oh, here's some tools and here's some skills, have fun. But it really requires dedication and commitment to one's desire to really, really get that deep healing. And the reason is because so often people that come in and see me or work with us here at the center, they have seen patterns over and over. So they've seen these same triggers over and over in different relationships and different circumstances, and they're at a point where they don't wish to repeat that anymore. And so they really do make that commitment to do this really deep dive. Like I call it a deep dive. Depending on the day, I'm either a deep sea diver or I am cleaning out that wound that has become infected. Like I am that hydrogen peroxide, that alcohol that's going in and it burns and it stings, but we're going to take care of that wound so that it'll be healed up and it won't be infected anymore. And so I had to say that before I answered the question, and now I forgot what the question was. Oh, how it transpires after that. So really, it's about, okay, I've now had the awareness. Okay, oops, at the grocery store, my inner child who felt unseen and unimportant just took over. Okay, and that's okay. Like I can, and it's through different practices, primarily mindfulness and observation, because becoming a mindful observer is how we start to recognize when these different parts of us are operating. And so from that observer role, and sure, we're human, we're going to still have those fits every now and again, we'll still have a sneaky trigger come up because we're human and we're not supposed to be perfect. But what we can do is have more awareness around, maybe I get to the car and I realize, oh my gosh, like that was so out of character for me. I wonder what was going on. And then I have an opportunity to sit and just pause and say, okay, well, what just happened there? And then I can go back and be like, oh, ouch. Okay, when that woman cut me in line, I felt unimportant. So it's like bringing the story to the surface. It's bringing the story to the awareness. And then you can, again, gently hold that part of yourself and just say, it's okay. We had a tantrum. It's totally okay. And it's just like, there's a reason it's called inner child work. And it's really because we are treating that part of ourselves as though it is that child. And we are trying to love it and nurture it as a parent would. So me as my adult self am nurturing that part of me that's a child. And whether you have biological children or you don't have biological children, if a 5-year-old had a temper tantrum at the grocery store, my hope is that, you wouldn't be screaming at that child for having the tantrum. You would lovingly and gently sit down and ask them, like, I wonder what that was about. What's going on? And then rather than shaming them for having had the tantrum, like, oh yeah, that was a really hard experience. Okay, it's okay. I'm still here and I still love you. I still love you even though you had that tantrum. So it's really about dialoguing with it internally from this observer place.
Yeah, it's just so beautifully said. The self-compassion there is so evident of talking about that nurturing relationship with ourselves. And like you said, the example of, whether or not you have biological or children at all is it doesn't need to be a requirement in order to visualize what that younger, more wounded part of ourself needs in that moment, which really is compassion, not criticism or judgment of why the heck did you do that? What's wrong with you? But come here, let's sit and talk about it.
Totally. And I like to call it, when I work with my clients, I invite them, I go, you know what? Let that part of you just sit on the couch with you right now. Like, pull it into your lap, see what it has to say right now. And you'll come to find what message it has for you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that what you brought up a moment ago, the depth of this work is so intense, and being able to, I love that you brought that up, and I appreciate that. And thinking about that there have got to be, and I can think of some personally, some fears that come up of even thinking about doing this work, right? Like, what will I discover? How will it change the relationships around me? How will it change the way that I connect with others? I mean, all these things come to my mind in thinking about kind of accessing these old parts of ourselves that are hurting so much and are really crying for that nurturance.
Yes, and you are absolutely right. There are times where I hear that from the people I work with. I actually started working with a new client recently this week, and I could sense that as we started exploring a little bit more, she felt exactly what you were talking about. And when I asked her to lean into it, she said exactly that. Like, I'm worried how this work might impact my relationships.
Yeah, that awareness of things needing to be different can be so scary sometimes.
Yeah, it can. And it's important to honor that. And it's important to, again, hold that part of us, because that's another part that if we don't acknowledge and honor can come in and sabotage things, right? And so that can be the part that runs and quits doing the work when it gets hard or challenging, or when dynamics start to shift. That's the person that bails and doesn't come to their appointments anymore, and that's the self-sabotage piece, versus being able to have that conversation of, yeah, I'm feeling really scared and really worried about how this might shift things. And then we can relate with that part.
Well, yeah, and being able to give it a voice, because I mean, thinking about inner child work, so much of it is not, so much of that inner child is that it hasn't had a voice, right? Or that its voice has been something that has been disempowered or discredited, told to go away. And so thinking about even, I'm scared to do this work, is this healing process of just being able to verbalize those things in the first place and have them be heard and held, versus, oh, well, everybody's scared. Or, like, it's really honoring that in and of itself can be a corrective experience.
Absolutely. And it's really about just being that loving witness, holding it, letting them speak it. And you're absolutely right, because when you think about, oftentimes as children, their voice isn't, it's not encouraged for them to, voice what's really going on. Or it's just like, oh, honey, it'll be fine. Or, oh, honey, you're being silly about that. Or, oftentimes, because adults forget that children don't have that concept, it can just be brushed off, a lot of times. And so absolutely, it's about allowing that part to just be heard, held, and witnessed.
I love that. That really fits for so much in terms of thinking about this work. And so thinking, okay, so let's back it up even further, because you're right. This is deep work and it's amazing work, but a lot of people don't know this is the work that they need to do, right? Like they know something's off, but they don't call and say, "Hey, Shirani, I really need to work on my inner child." Like that piece is a lot of steps forward. They're noticing, like you said, patterns of behavior, ways that they keep falling into the same traps, if you will. And so what is, for the listeners out there feeling like, gosh, there is a story that I tell myself and it does take me out of character, what are the things that they can be aware of to even start thinking that this is work that they could start looking to do?
Yeah, well, and I think what I'm hearing you say is asking how this shows up.
Yes, thank you.
What does this look
Thank
like?
you, yes.
And the way it shows up in our lives is, maybe we have the same flaky friendships. Like, we're struggling with, why are my friends always flaky? Why are they, or why do I keep people at a distance? Like, why don't I have real friendships? Or maybe it shows up in relationships as, how am I always picking like the unavailable men? Or maybe it shows up in our workplace with our bosses. Why do my bosses never support me? Or maybe it comes in that quick temperedness where I'm doing all good and life is good, and then all of a sudden I'm flying off the handle and have no idea why. And those are some of the more, apparent ones, but sometimes it can just be that sense that there's something wrong, like just like there's something and I'm not sure, like I don't feel fulfilled, like on the exterior life is great, but there's just something missing. And there's something that's just not connecting or connected, or why is it that every time I'm up for a promotion at work, I get passed over, things like that.
Yeah, and I can just imagine the fears that come up with those questions, because I think about the work, that happens in my office. When people start seeing patterns, they start going to a place of judgment and shame, right? Like I'm always choosing unavailable men. I'm the problem. And being able to externalize it enough to have it say, yes, this is a pattern, let's explore it and do the work necessary, versus, yeah, you're right, you are the problem. Because when clients get to that realization of I've seen a pattern, that's powerful because we can do work with it, but it's always kind of holding that line of going, okay, yes, you found a common denominator in you. So, and that's healing work that you need to do, versus have them then leave and go, oh, well, now I've determined that the problem is within me. And so I can definitely, it taps again into the fear of doing this work.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very fine line. And, my training is as a social worker. And so I have such a hard time when I use this word with my therapy clients, but that victim mentality and that victim state. And I have such a hard time when I actually bring it into the therapy work. But I'm not talking about victim like, the battered woman or the child who was abused. Like that's not the type of victim I talk about. I talk more about victim consciousness, which I often find when we're in that victim consciousness, this blaming of myself, like, oh, I'm the problem, like that's again our inner child operating and running. Because when we're in a space where we feel very disempowered, that's probably also another indication that our inner child is operating and running the show.
Yeah, I think that's powerful. Will you describe what you mean by victim consciousness? Because I love that term, and I have a feeling of how you're going to describe it. And so will you just share that with the audience? Because I think that's so powerful, because being in a place of victim, right, where everybody in the world is against me, and so it must all be them, is such a disempowered place, right? Like it leaves us with a sense of what's the point of doing anything because everybody's against me anyway. And so when you say victim consciousness, please share. I want to hear how you describe it.
I don't know how to add anything else to what you just shared, because I think you did a great job summarizing it. And it really is that when you're in this place of woe is me, the world is against me, nothing goes my way, nothing good ever happens, that's all coming from this victim consciousness. It's coming from this very disempowered state. It's coming from a place of everyone else has power over me and I am, I have no power. It's not even I don't have as much power. It's like I have no power. And so a lot of the work is around helping to take back that power that's so freely been given away to others. They talk about the doormat, right? Like oftentimes people will be like, "Oh, I'm such a doormat," and it's really about bringing power back to where power lies, which is within you. And it's when we turn it away and give it away, that we're in that victim consciousness. And there's something else I want to say about it. So let me pause for a second and see what's coming through. It's about us creating that reality. So when we're in that victim space and we're thinking, woe is me and the world is against me and everything is wrong in my life, the world will mirror that back to you. And everything will go wrong in your life. And people will be against you and people will pick on you and people will bully you because that is the lens that you're taking. So then it perpetuates and it recreates that story of, yeah, I have no power and the world sucks and my life sucks. And so it's like constantly recreating that pattern in your life. And so when the shift happens when we can start to recognize, oh, that's coming from a wounded part of me that has that belief. But Shirani, the adult, doesn't have that belief. And so when I can relate to the wounded child in me, that has whatever belief it is, then I can start to take ownership of my power again.
Oh, I love that. I love the idea of ownership of power. I was actually just talking with a client the other day about the term learned helplessness, and I was sharing about that. Again, I don't know the researcher, so sorry, sir, whoever did this research. It was, all those years ago. But of what they did with the dogs, and so I'll share it real quick for the audience, for those of you that don't know, is they would have dogs in, like a crate or a kennel. And they would call the dog out over the threshold, and every time it would go through the threshold, it would get administered, this small little shock. And so obviously this was many, many years ago, before ethics boards and all those sorts of things kind of governed all these psychological experiments. God help us. But that this little shock would be administered, and so obviously the dog would retreat to the back of the crate. And over time, they would continue doing this kind of intermittently. They would offer a treat or some sort of kind of thing to call the dog out. And over time, the dog stopped coming out because it had learned that no matter what it did, it would get that shock. If it came quickly, if it came slowly, if it came cautiously, it would still get that shock. And so this psychological term, learned helplessness, was really created from that. And I think that so often, really, if we tie this into, life being unscripted, that we can go through these things where it feels like we're constantly crashing, the waves are constantly crashing against the rocks. And over time, we can start to believe that no matter what we do, we will still get beat up if we try and move outside of ourselves. And how disempowering that belief is, because I know for the work that I do and the work that I've done, on my own, is that there are things that happen around us where the waves are crashing up against the rocks. Like, that is legitimate stuff. That when we move to that place of realizing that things can happen all around us, but we still have the power within us to embrace those wounded parts, to offer healing, to offer comfort, that we can find a calm within the storm. Even when it feels like things are crashing around us, we can still hold on to our power and not hand it away and say, yes, all these bad things have happened, and here you go, somebody else take over, because I can't do it anymore, because nothing I do will make a difference. And that's a big, big difference.
Absolutely. And as you're talking about these waves and this crashing on the rocks, what I'm thinking about is, a part of taking back our power is also means we grab a surfboard and we learn how to ride that wave and navigate it so that we don't get caught up on that crashing, and yeah, maybe we fall off the surfboard, or maybe we hit the rocks, a couple times, but it'll be different. It'll be a different way of approaching it. So rather than being the rock that gets crashed on all the time, you now get to have like a more empowered being in relationship with. And this is what it's about, power with, which is a concept that blows our minds. Like, how do we have power with? We're so used to power over or power under that it's really challenging for us to wrap our minds around having power with.
I love that. I mean, literally, I got chills as you were saying that, because it's saying, okay, I don't need to be the rock anymore. I can grab the surfboard and scoot away from being crashed and sucked under every time. I think that's such a powerful example of it. So tell a little bit about when you say power with, because I literally got chills when you said that. What do you mean for people that are unfamiliar with that?
Yeah, it's one of those things where, so power over, power under dynamics, right? My boss is more powerful than me and I have no say. So this is and we're so used to this, right? It's why so many of us, especially as women, don't like to speak up at work, right? Because we're women and maybe my boss is a man, or even if my boss is another woman, we may there's those weird power under, power over dynamics that we have, right? And being in power with is really about recognizing, on a human level, my boss is no different than me. And so we can have power with. Yes, there's systems in place that don't allow for that. Like in jobs where there are those hierarchies, right? Like, there are certain ways that, yes, power over, power under dynamics still play. But when we can flip out of the mindset of, oh my gosh, my boss is like the god at work, right? And we can flip out of that and recognize, oh no, my boss is another human being. And as another human being, we share equal power. in that way. So just having a different approach. Or to take it back to inner child work, like it's about being able to hold two different parts. It's about being able to hold the fear and still do the thing that's causing a lot of fear and anxiety. So in my webinar example, right, I was able to hold the fear of what are my colleagues going to think about me when I don't have theorists to back up who I'm talking, what I'm talking about. When I don't have the names or whatever that might be, like the fear of what are they going to think of me, and holding that and still doing the webinar anyway, and really stepping out beyond that. And this is true in relationships. Recently, a theme has been in a lot of people in my life, both personally and professionally, where people are in this point in relationships where they're like, I am no longer willing to stay in it the way it is. And at the same time, I'm not ready to walk away. Like, how do you hold both? And it's this new concept that we have to wrap our minds around.
Yeah, because it's physically exhausting to hold more than one feeling at the same time. I always say, clients I just want one feeling. Like, just give me sadness or anger or frustration. And I shouldn't even say clients, I'm the same way. Just give me one feeling, because then I can soothe that one. Versus the challenge, what you're talking about is this containing and holding the fear to be important and still moving forward. Like, and physically, it's uncomfortable to hold multiple feelings. And so it's almost like you said, training our bodies that we can handle more than one feeling, and the world will continue to, spin the way it's supposed to.
Yes. And that it'll be okay. And this is where, like, that trust, not only learning that your child learns to trust you as an adult, but also trust in something bigger and greater that holds all of us.
No, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. And I know that, you and I could go on for hours talking about this, because it's just, I'm having too much fun. But I want to be mindful too. I know, because it is the start of a holiday weekend, folks. I know this will probably air months later, so you guys are all going to think we're talking about Labor Day, but we're actually talking about the 4th of July. And so it is Friday afternoon on the 4th of July weekend. So I want to kind of start wrapping up a little bit, just to be conscientious of that, because I really do feel like we could continue this conversation. And, actually, you guys, for those of you listening, like, if you have specific questions or topics that you would like Shirani to pop back on and do like a part 2 of this, like, send that in via email or the SpeakPipe app. I'll go ahead and link all that stuff in the show notes, because I think it would be fun to dive into this conversation a little bit more based on listener questions and things like that. So I
would love to do that. It would be so much fun. No, I would like, because I too can talk about this forever. When I said I love this work, like, I meant it. I love this work, and I don't know how we could keep it contained to one episode. So absolutely, awesome. I'd be happy to answer anything else that comes up at a future time.
Perfect. And so I just sprung that on Shirani, so you can see how gracious she is. She rolled with it, going, sure, we can do a part 2. So thinking about that, okay, so if this is a very foundational part of kind of our conversation, one is, what would you like to offer the listeners in terms of, I'm not an advice giver, but any sort of words of wisdom or encouragement as they're becoming aware that there are wounded parts of themselves that are jumping into the driver's seat? Anything that you can offer, or any sort of, suggestions or just kind of encouragement as they might be becoming more aware of the need to dive into this deep work?
Yeah, the first thing that comes up onto my mind actually is recognizing that everyone is wounded. So if you have a part of you that's acting from this wounded place, recognize, as human beings, we are all wounded. And it's because humans are not perfect. And imperfect humans have raised other imperfect humans, And so even if you feel like your life was not traumatic or nothing big or major happened, but that being wounded doesn't mean you're broken, or having a wound doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. We all have them. So I think that's the first thing that comes up is that awareness and that recognition of, nope, sorry, there's nothing special and unique about you. Like, we all are faced with this. And so that's the first thing that I want to mention. And then like you said earlier, Anna, is that compassion for yourself. Like, so part of it is recognizing you're normal if you have a wounded part. And the second part is recognizing that it's really about compassion and being really gentle and easy with yourself and literally treating yourself as you would an infant or a toddler or a 5-year-old. It's really, really, really that important that we start to flip the script and our dialogue and take a more compassionate approach with ourselves.
No, it's so well said. I think that is just, wisdom that can carry us so far, of knowing that we all have these pieces, these wounded pieces, and there is no exception to that because we are human, and that being able to be compassionate about those parts is, kind of our primary and foundational goal within amongst it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Shirani, thank you so much for taking the time to be able to, get to know the audience and let them get to know you as well. And can you share with folks how they can find you and follow your work? Because I'd love for them to be able to find you and see all the great work you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm working on a blog series over the summer, which will be all finalized by the time this podcast comes out, on the inner child. So you can find out more about me and the inner child and the work that we do at our website at www.relationshipcentersv.com. And there you'll also find information about a women's retreat that I'm facilitating in Lake Tahoe, September 30th and October 1st and 2nd. So I'll be taking a very small group of women. It'll be a very intimate group to do this deep, deep, deep dive in a retreat called Healing the Inner Child, a women's weekend retreat. So all of that information is available right there on our website. And there's other ways to connect with us on our homepage as well. So that's how you can find out more about us and this work.
Fantastic. And I'll link the website in the show notes too, guys, so you guys can be able to click over there and see it and really find out the information about this amazing retreat that you're putting together, because I cannot wait to hear how it goes. I know it's just going to be such a success. So if you guys are interested in attending, excited. Oh, I would imagine this is talk about the high that you'll be on afterwards, and the exhaustion. But I will definitely link that in the show notes. So if you guys are interested in attending or getting more information, you can definitely pop over there too. So, well, thank you so much, Shirani, for taking the time today. It's just an absolute honor to be able to sit and talk with you and connect and just kind of continue building the relationship that we have.
Yeah, you are so welcome. And I thank you for having me on as a guest. I'm just so honored that I get to share and spread the message of this work. So thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Wow, what an amazing interview with Shirani. There was just so many amazing pieces of it. And honestly, if there are questions or things that you would love for Shirani and I to be able to discuss again, send in your questions and things like that. She's been so gracious to offer to come back on the podcast and really expand and deepen a lot of the stuff that we were able to just graze the surface with in seriously almost an hour. It's hard to believe that the time went by that fast. Some of the things that really stood out to me is recognizing that when we are acting out of character, if we're acting differently than how we see ourselves in the world or how we typically show up, to be very mindful of that and aware of how we can, look at that as something that is triggered or wounded within ourselves that is really kind of causing us to act out of character, and really being able to reach out for the support to be able to do that work. I just thought that was such a cool indicator that she highlighted. And I love that she talked about this fact that, just because we're wounded doesn't mean we're broken. And to me, it was just so powerful to be able to hear that, because there are wounded parts within each of us. And I think that there's also a tremendous amount of shame associated with those wounded parts, and being able to own that it's about learning to be able to be a loving witness to those wounds and to be able to really hold them and honor them and heal them rather than just shoving them away or shaming them is just an amazing, amazing reminder, but it's also can be a new idea to some people. So I love that she really just shared about that, because it felt so powerful. I had chills not only when I was doing the interview with her, but also when I went back and edited it. There were just moments that were just so powerful and so kind of visceral in terms of how meaningful they were. So I just am so appreciative of Shirani. And like we said, please let us know if you would like to have us dive deeper, or if you have questions, send them in via the SpeakPipe app or to Anna@herlifeunscripted.com, and Shirani and I can do a whole show answering those questions. That would be amazing. So yeah, it is fun. It is really cool. And it's just, I'm honored to be able to have such brilliant people coming and giving of their time and being able to work with me to be able to just share amazing content with you guys. So I appreciate it so much. And be sure and check out the show notes, because in it I do have the links to Shirani's work, so you guys can connect with her and learn more about the retreat she's got going on at the end of September. And also do be sure to head over to herlifeunscripted.com, the retreats page, and sign up to get on the email list, because we've got some amazing in-person live events that are coming up next spring. And I would love to be able to share that information with you guys in real time, rather than some of the delays that happen with launching podcasts and when the episodes are aired. So I'm excited to be able to be moving forward to meeting all of you guys in person. And I just am so appreciative of you creating the time and energy to be able to just connect and also listen to the podcast. So keep subscribing, keep rating and reviewing, and just know that I am so appreciative of everything that you're doing. Take care, you guys. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Want to learn about the latest retreats, workshops, and speaking events hosted by Anna? Head over to herlifeunscripted.com to get in on all the juicy details. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast so we can continue to grow our amazing audience. Lastly, be sure and send in your voice feedback via the SpeakPipe app or to Anna@herlifeunscripted.com. We can't wait to hear from you.